Welcome here for revenge stories. Make sure you all are subscribe my channel. Enjoy. The cold hit me like a slap the moment the car door shut. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the red glow of the taillights. Inside the car, my mother's face had been carved in shadow and dashboard light, sharp, unmovable, furious in that terrifyingly quiet way. "Walk home, Nova," she'd said. "Maybe the cold will teach you how to speak properly." Then the tires spat gravel, and she disappeared. I was 17. It was the middle of winter, and I was alone on a rural stretch of road with nothing but darkness on both sides. My name is Nova Hale. If you looked at our family online, you'd think we were a postcard. Coordinated holiday pajamas. Perfectly filtered smiles. A mother everyone praised as selfless, graceful, heaven-sent. But heaven doesn't leave its child miles from home for asking, "Why did you hit me?" The wind sliced through my jacket like it wasn't there. My lips went numb first, then my fingers. I hugged myself, trying to trap whatever warmth hadn't escaped yet. My phone had died minutes before she forced me out. No streetlights, no houses, just endless black road and the crunch of frozen gravel under my boots. My breath came in shaky clouds. Half a mile in, my legs felt heavy. A mile later, they felt like someone else's. I kept replaying it, the question, soft and careful. Her hand across my face. The order to get out. Halfway down the shoulder, my knees buckled. I caught myself with my palms against the frozen pavement. For a moment, I thought about staying there, just closing my eyes. Then headlights slowed behind me. My heart jumped into my throat. For a split second, I thought she'd come back. Maybe regret had found her. But regret had never lived in that house. The car that stopped wasn't hers. It was older, engine humming unevenly. The driver's door creaked open. "Nova, sweetheart." My chest cracked open at the sound of that voice. Grandma May. The only soft place I'd ever known. I almost collapsed again, but she reached me first, wrapping her thick wool coat around my shoulders. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. "What did she do this time?" she whispered. "Not what happened. Not are you okay?" She already knew. Everyone knew. Everyone except the people who called my mother an angel. Grandma didn't lecture. She didn't force conversation. She just drove, one hand tight on the wheel, the other gripping mine. The warmth of her palm made me realize how frozen I was. She glanced at me under the dim interior light and inhaled sharply. "Nova, you're turning blue." Her voice broke on the last word. The car sped up. By the time we rushed into the emergency room, the world felt underwater. Sounds were distant. Lights were too bright. My legs wouldn't move right. Grandma half carried me through the doors. "Possible hypothermia," someone called. Hands were suddenly everywhere. Heated blankets, monitors, rubbing warmth into stiff fingers. The pain came next. Not cold, but fire. Needles of heat racing under frozen skin. I remember Grandma trying to explain between tears. I remember a nurse's eyes lingering too long on my arms, on my ribs, on the faint yellowing bruises my mother always called discipline. Then the questions began. "Who left you outside? How far did you walk? Has this happened before? Do you feel safe at home?" I'd spent years protecting her reputation. Protecting the woman who baked for neighbors, volunteered at church, smiled for photos. The woman who made sure the marks never showed where anyone could see. But under those fluorescent ER lights, the truth felt louder than loyalty. The door opened again. A woman with a clipboard stepped in. Child Protective Services. Behind her stood 2 police officers. The taller officer paused in the doorway, like she'd just walked into a crime scene. In a way, she had. The CPS worker pulled a chair close to my bed. Her voice was calm, steady, practiced. "Nova," she said gently, "we just need to understand what happened tonight." And for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. If I told the truth, everything would shatter. If I didn't, I might not survive the next winter. "Nova, we just need the truth," the CPS worker said gently. "Tell us what happened tonight." I stared at my hands, wrapped in hospital-warm towels. They were still trembling, not from the cold anymore, but from something older. Years of silence loosening its grip. She made me get out, I whispered. She told me to walk home. How far were you? I don't know. Miles. Her gaze shifted to the fading yellow bruises along my ribs. I felt it, that shift in the room. The air tightening. The machines beeping steadily while my heart pounded loud enough to drown them out. And the bruises? She asked softly. The officers exchanged a look. The kind that says, "We've seen this before." Has your mother hit you? The worker pressed. I didn't mean to cry. I meant to stay composed, controlled, the way I'd trained myself to be. But tears slipped out anyway. I nodded. That nod broke everything. One of the officers stepped into the hallway. I heard the low murmur of a radio. Then, clear as glass-cutting tile. Go ahead with the arrest. The words didn't feel real. They floated down the corridor like they belonged to some other story. Some other girl. But they were for me. For the 17-year-old left on a frozen road because she dared to ask why. As the officers left to find her, a strange quiet settled over my hospital room. Not relief. Not yet. Just the dizzy sensation of a lifetime of fear starting to crack. Grandma squeezed my hand. She can't hurt you tonight, she whispered. But my mind wasn't on tonight. It was on everything that came before. Because arresting her for one night wasn't enough. My mother had spent years building a reputation like a fortress. Church volunteer. Charity organizer. The woman who remembered every birthday and baked extra pies for the neighbors. Online, she was flawless. In public, she was warmth itself. At home, she was winter. She'd post glowing Thanksgiving photos after making me eat in the hallway for attitude. She'd smile at school events after bruising my arm in the parking lot for embarrassing her. If she wanted to be perfect, fine. I would let the truth ruin her. When the doctor returned and mentioned that my mother was denying everything, I almost laughed. Of course she was. Nova, the CPS worker said, setting a small recorder on the bedside table. We need an official statement. Good, I replied. They moved me to a private room. Not for comfort, but for safety. My mother had already called the hospital twice, demanding to know my location, claiming I'd run away for attention. Classic. The recorder blinked red. Start wherever you need, the worker said. My pulse thudded in my ears. My hands shook in my lap. But when I began speaking, my voice surprised me. It was steady. No screaming. No hysteria. Just truth. I told him about the slaps. The silent treatments that lasted days. The way she'd yank me by the arm hard enough to leave fingerprints. The insults delivered in a whisper, so no one else would hear. The car rides where I never knew what version of her I'd get. With every sentence, the officer's expression hardened. Grandma cried quietly beside me, her hand anchored on my shoulder. When the recorder finally clicked off, the room felt heavier. This is enough to open a full case, the CPS worker murmured. I swallowed. There's more. I reached for my backpack, the one thing I'd grabbed before she forced me out, and pulled out my old cracked phone. She'd never known I kept it. Years of insurance. Years of quiet documentation. My fingers hesitated only a second before unlocking it. The first video played. My mother screaming inches from my face, her voice venomous, while I stood perfectly still. Next, a photo of bruises blooming purple across my ribs last summer. Then screenshots. Messages calling me ungrateful, worthless, trash for asking for school supplies. The room went silent. The officer exhaled slowly. This dismantles her entire narrative. And that's when everything began collapsing fast. Police contacted her again, this time with evidence. She tried charm first, then tears, then outrage. But desperation makes cracks visible. When officers arrived at our apartment, neighbors stepped into the hallway. Curious, concerned. Her voice carried, sharp, frantic. This isn't me. I'm a good mother. She's lying. But the performance was over. They cuffed her right there at the door. The woman who curated perfection like a brand now sobbing under fluorescent hallway lights. And just when she thought humiliation was the worst of it, one officer said calmly, We'll also need to search the apartment. For the first time in 17 years, she wasn't controlling the narrative. The truth was, the officers were inside the apartment less than 10 minutes before the tone changed. I wasn't there to see it, but Grandma told me later how the first cop stepped back into the hallway, jaw tight, eyes no longer neutral. The neighbors had gathered by then. Doors cracked open, whispers floating through the corridor. They were watching the same woman who lectured about strong parenting, now standing pale and shaking as her carefully polished life split down the middle. Inside that apartment, they found what I had lived with for years. Belts tucked into drawers like tools. Printed screenshots of messages where she mocked me to relatives. Typed schedules labeled corrections. A journal, pages and pages, detailing the punishments she believed I deserved. She had cataloged her cruelty, as if it were organization,
as if it were discipline.
When everything was laid out for CPS, the lead worker didn't soften her words. This isn't just neglect, she said. This is systemic abuse. And just like that, the illusion died. No more misunderstood mother. No more saintly volunteer. No more curated captions and staged smiles. Just truth, stripped bare and impossible to defend. She was denied bail pending further investigation. The same friends who once flooded her posts with heart emojis went silent. Church members who used to call her inspirational suddenly needed more information. Relatives who claimed they'd never suspected a thing began recalling every uncomfortable dinner, every too tight grip on my arm. Her empire didn't explode. It caved in under its own weight. But the part she never anticipated, the part that truly shifted my life, happened quietly. While the officers processed evidence, Grandma filed for emergency guardianship. That same night, within hours, CPS approved it. I didn't go into foster care. I didn't get handed to strangers or shuffled through temporary beds. I went home with her. The hospital discharged me just before dawn. Snow drifted down in soft, steady flakes, covering the sidewalks in fresh white. It felt like the world had exhaled. Grandma held my hand as we walked to her car. "You're safe now, Nova," she said. I'd heard promises before. I'd learned not to trust them. But standing there, watching the snow settle without fear of what waited behind a front door, for the first time in 17 years, I believed it.